Hello again, and welcome to the salubrious Jecks office. Cheers. Good scrumpy that, still going. Also, thank you to the 32 new subscribers that have turned up in the last week. It's quite astonishing to get that many people just because of one video, but obviously a lot of people were interested in Scrivener. So welcome to all of you who are now watching this. I've been asked a few things in the last week. One was how to write a battle scene, which I'll do fairly soon. That'll be up week after next, I think. But I've also been asked, how do you submit a novel? And I thought I'd increase that and expand it out a bit. So how do you do a novel? How do you submit to any sort of competition as well? Because I used to run a few. I mean, the main thing is that if you're submitting a book or a competition entry, anything at all, the first thing that the editor and the competition organiser is going to look for is a reason to reject it. It's a very sad fact, but an editor that reading a book that is very repetitive, that has lousy grammar, that has bad punctuation, that has misspellings all over the place, the first thing they're going to think is, well, this author doesn't have any respect for the work themselves, so why should I respect it? It's a very important principle that if you're putting any work in, then you need to make sure it's absolutely the best quality you possibly can. I once had an entry for a competition that I was organising for the Crime Writers Association that had on the very first page a body discovered in the back of a black sedan, which sounded thoroughly painful to me. My daughter's now tittering dreadfully. It's difficult to concentrate, but I will persevere. On the second page, this same author had a grisly secret, GRIZZL. Clearly, that was not someone who had taken any care or effort over his work. It always used to be the case that if you sent off a manuscript to a publisher, then you'd have to wait till that manuscript came back before you could send it to a different publisher. Basically just a matter of courtesy in the old days. That doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be the case that publishers would look out for really badly dog-eared manuscripts if it had every page turned over several times and basically looking a little bit messy. They'd know that it had already gone round the houses and nobody else liked it, which coloured their attitude towards it. Nowadays it's a bit easier because, of course, with electronic communications you can just send off your electronic version of the book much more easily. But what you have to bear in mind is that if a publisher says they want to have it in a certain format, you must make sure it's in that format. If they say they need it in a Word docx form, then make sure you send it to them in docx. They won't be impressed if you send it in teletype format. In the same way, if you look through the Artists and Writers Yearbook or one of the other listings, make sure you comply with everything that they say. If you're sending in for a competition and they have the 10 things to avoid when sending in a competition entry, read it and avoid them. Do not do. I once sent in some instructions for people who wanted to send in entries for a short story competition, and the first thing said, make sure every single page is double line spaced, printed on one side of the sheet only. And the number of people who sent in single line spaced and printed on both sides of a sheet of paper to save themselves money, everyone was not complying with the rules. They had to be ditched. There is a feeling amongst publishers too that always used to be there, that if you were to send in a manuscript that had been professionally bound with full colour front copy and everything, it didn't impress the publishers, because the first thing the publishers had to do was to rip it out of its binding, because publishers like dealing with separate sheets of paper. It is much easier for them to read and put down. They don't like things to be bound, because then you have to have a desk in front of you or something to be able to read it. So there's reasons why they ask for all these things. Same with competitions. If you go to a competition and they require you to give your name on the front page but not to have your name on every single page, usually the reason is so that they can anonymise your entries. If they're sending out those competitions to a whole bunch of judges, they want to make sure that the judge doesn't know who that entry has come from. Now, it could be that a very kindly organiser will go through with some Tipp-Ex and Tipp-Ex out every single occurrence of your name on every page of that short story and then photocopy it for the benefit of the judges. But it's quite likely they won't, they'll just ditch it. You also have to bear in mind when you're sending in to a publisher, the commissioning editor, the person who reads your work and will hopefully commission you, isn't just an enormously powerful princess in an ivory tower. She is someone who is going to have to promote your work inside her office. So for example, there will be at my publisher's Headline or Simon & Schuster, they have commissioning meetings every Monday morning, and for 2 hours or so each of the editors will go through the books that they've read and say, this is why I think we ought to be buying into this story, this is why I think we ought to be offering this author £25,000, £50,000, £100,000. They do that, and so if you send in something that it may impress one editor, but she's then got to stand up and explain to all of her colleagues why she thinks this book is worth a lot of money, that's a difficult thing for an editor to do. Make sure you make her job as easy as possible. Now, usually, of course, you don't go straight to a publisher. The way things are nowadays, you've got to go through an agent. The reason for that is that publishers themselves are receiving 11 or 12 unsolicited manuscripts every single day of the week in the UK. That's actually exactly the same for agents. They have the same problem. So what you have to do is make sure that your work shines, make sure that you tick every box, make sure that you give them a brief covering letter. Do not give them a 10-page covering letter. It is a covering letter saying, this is my story, I see that you represent this guy, this guy, this guy. I think that you will find that this is an ideal combination of a mixture of a George Smiley and Jason Bourne story. I look forward to hearing from you. Nothing more than that. Your story will speak for itself. After that, you want to have a synopsis, which just gives, in 2 or 3 pages, an overview of what the story's about. I would always put in another couple of pages, which would be, what is the main point of the plot? What is the main point of each of the characters? What is the motivation for the characters? And keep it very simple, just 1 or 2 lines on each, but it just gives a little bit more comfort factor to the editor to know that you've thought about these things. And after that, it's in the lap of the gods. You have to just hope that somebody will want to buy it. It's the difficult thing is when you've sent off your manuscript and you're waiting to hear back. What most people do is they go to the pub. It is a good idea. However, I've always found that the best thing to do is when you've sent off your book, forget about it and write something else. Because if you want to be a writer, you exist to write. You can send off work, but you need to be at home working while it's gone away. You're not going to be a professional author if you sit back and wait after you've sent off your book and wait 9 months until you hear back from each of the different publishers saying no. So that's it. Sit down, write, give yourself some goals to achieve, make sure that you achieve them, write lots of words every day, and at the end of the day you'll have a novel, which is a delightful thing. Now I've got She Who Must Be Obeyed. My daughter is pointing at me, which says that I'm rambling on for too long. But she's also saying that I must ask you, if you like this, then say you like it by clicking the little like box. Do add any comments. If you've got any thoughts for any future videos you'd like to see, do please let me know, because I'll be happy to incorporate them. Subscribe, favourite, and of course share the video with other people if you like it. I hope you do, because if you don't, it makes it all a little bit pointless, doesn't it? Which would be sad. So, I think now I'd better get back to the important things in life, my cider, and the next book. It's going to be jolly good, actually. It's very exciting. I've killed off several hundred people today in a battle scene. These are the things that make you happy. Be careful, and cheers. I've been asked several times, how do I actually get my work done? How do I plan my work? How do I use whiteboards? What sort of software do I use on the computer?